And so we had the 5 that we went on to a data recovery, and that's where I'm going to show you all the pictures of the artifacts. I'm just bringing it together to the end where we really did our major excavation out there. So this is the proper definition of a data recovery. And of course, this is only when the sites cannot be avoided. And we'd like to be able to preserve sites if we can. So because there may actually be a tool in the future. I mean, we have ground penetrating radar and different kinds of equipment now that gives us a pretty good picture underground, but there's still a lot of interpretation to do. So maybe we will have a real X-ray machine at some point. However, so we are actually getting as much information as we can at this point, because then the site is going to be destroyed. At JT Berry, we excavated about 14, well, altogether about 14%. We excavated about 3%, 3 to 5% of every locus. And that's still quite a bit. And that is enough for us to know how old the site is, what kinds of activities may have been were going on there, possibly the population, maybe how many people may have been there. But it gives us the pertinent information that we need to add to the archaeological database, because it's impossible to excavate 100% of the site, especially in this circumstance when it's being developed. If we had years to do it, that would be one thing, but when we don't, and it's also very costly. It definitely adds up. So when we go to a data recovery, we're done with our test pits, our small 50 by 50s, and now we're opening up. These are 2 by 2 meter squares. And again, we're placing these in the areas where we found the highest concentration of artifacts or features, and then so we can further explore. Every 2 by 2, we split up into 1 by 1 meter quads, and we excavate each quad, one whole level, and again, doing it by 10 centimeter levels, and bagging everything separately. And just to show you, we went back again to locus 1, 3, we did our data recovery on 3, 1, 4, 9, what am I missing, and 6. And I'm going to zero in on locus 1, just to give you an idea of what the different stages we went through. So you can see all our test pits, and then we opened up larger 2 by 2 meter units. And locus 1 happened to have 3 concentration areas within it. And because you can see a lot of these pits that aren't filled in, the little test pits, we didn't find anything in those test pits. So it sort of broke the site up into 3 activity areas.
How many acres was that there?
Excuse me?
How many acres?
How many acres?
Was
well,
the whole thing?
The whole site is about 87 acres.
Oh.
Yeah. And that was, and then each locus was, about 2 to 4. We do it in, we do it in meters, so we have about 100 square meters and on the site. We, or 100 by 100, I should say, this particular site. So we split it up, and it had about 3 activity areas, and we found, the majority of our artifacts that we found was chippy debris. Chippy debris, and we actually brought artifacts from the site that we have, a representative sample, and a very big bag of chippy debris that you can see. And these are all the pieces that come off when they're making, Native Americans were making their stone tools. And it's very distinct. You can definitely tell a piece of chippy debris from a pebble. And it has they all have a certain shape to them, an area of platform where they were hit off, either a cobble or a larger piece of rock, and a little bulb of percussion from when it was hit hard. So these flakes are very distinct, and when you look at the artifacts later, you should definitely take a look at this chipping debris. But this is what we mostly find. And to make one stone tool, you can have thousands of pieces of chipping debris, or hundreds of pieces of chipping debris. But you can also see they're all different colors there, and those are all different kinds of stone. So there was a variety of lithic technology, that we found lithic workshops or stone tool workshops, places where stone tools were being made on site. And the types of artifacts and spear points we found were, we found the Neville points, and which are all different sort of shapes and sizes. One of the things we see often with spear points, all kinds of stone tools, but especially the projectile points, are a lot of recycling, reworking of them. Sometimes the stone wasn't that easy to find. A lot of the stone that we found the tools made of at J.T. Berry is local. There's local resources. Some comes from the Blue Hills and Canton. A lot of, we found Blue Hills rhyolite. They're rhyolites, a lot of volcanic type of stone. A lot of quartz, white quartz, and quartzite. And argillite, which is a softer, greenish stone. And and then sometimes we do find some chert or flint. Like when the unknown author, collector, talked about all the flint chips he found, he wasn't really talking about flint as we know it, chert, because we don't have that here. If we do find it, it comes from New York or maybe even as far as Pennsylvania. This types of stone is a wonderful way to look at trade patterns as well and where something came from. And you can source exactly where it came from as well, or the quarries. But we do have some very nice materials here, but we don't have chert, and then a lot of you may have seen artifacts made of obsidian, the volcanic glass, which is very sharp, but that we actually don't even find east of the Mississippi.
We have soapstone?
We have soapstone, yes, we do have soapstone.
They used to make a lot of soapstones.
Yeah, soapstone is, a steatite, and actually soapstone is found a lot with those Orient fishtail points, and that was a connection that was made out of Orient, New York. We didn't find any soapstone at J.T. Berry, but they made bowls out of soapstone a lot, and there's quarries, there's several quarries in New England. There's one in Millbury, there's one in Pawtucket, Rhode Island, there's different quarries around, but they're far and few between.
Yeah, they used to travel distances.
Yes, they did, and they used soapstone to make their bowls prior to adopting clay to make pottery, and that was about 2,500 years ago.
You didn't find any fossils, did you?
We didn't find fossils. No, we didn't. We did find little pieces of burned bone, but we did not find any fossils. So we have our Neville points, our Brewerton points, and this is a drill. And actually, this is in two pieces. We found one piece in one unit, and then the other piece about a meter away, which is always fun. You find it and it's like, hey, this matches. So drills were used to drill holes through different kinds of stone tools or wood, wooden objects. And then we have these Squibnocket triangles, and this is named from Squibnocket Ridge on Martha's Vineyard. William Ridgey, who's a New York archaeologist, is the first person to name those. And these small stem points, which are, we say that they're between 4,000 and 3,000 years old in the late Archaic, but they have actually been found into the early woodland time period, up to about 1,000 years ago. So we are still always trying to find charcoal related to these points so that we can get better dates on them. But I think they were just such a simple style of point that they were used throughout for a longer period of time than most of the other ones. But it is interesting that certain styles were only used during certain time periods, and then they didn't use those anymore. But they may have recycled them into a different style. So sometimes the points, the tip will break off, and they may make a new tip. We have found that, or notch in a new base. And we could tell this is just the base of a point, but because of this little notch in the bottom, it's very, very particular to the Neville point. So we know that's a Neville base, just the base of the point. And then we found, this is our one woodland point, our one woodland artifact that we found, is this beautiful Jack's Reef, it's called, projectile point. And Actually, the person who found this on the site, it was his very first day working for PAL. And he really hadn't done that much excavation, that many sites. And I was working with him and showing him the ropes, and I told him about how you're not ever supposed to plant artifacts on a site, because that had happened. I was telling a story about actually somebody planting an artifact on a site. Okay, maybe it was me to try to play a joke on somebody else, but it backfired, so it's not a good thing to do. And just as I'm telling him the story, he pulls that point up, and it's the most, we never find points this beautiful. And he pulled it up and he's like, "Did you just plant this?" And I said, "No, oh my God." So it was his lucky day. I said, "I can't believe you just found that." And so it's beautiful, and it's the only, we do have it here, and it's the only woodland artifact that we found, but we did have one radiocarbon date at the site that, of a middle woodland date, so from one of our features, a pit feature. So there was some activity certainly in the area during the war. And then we find a lot of like scrapers for hides, scraping hides, or just reeds and grasses, and the tools, expedient tools we call them. So they just picked up a piece of that quartz and flaked it a little bit to make a nice scraper. Or or a knife or cutting tool, but you can tell that they've been altered. And one of our, here's another Neville point that was found in two pieces, again, about 1 meter away from each other. However, the interesting thing about this, it was also found in one of those 2 by 2 meter squares with these big pieces, we call them quarry blanks, of the same kind of material, the same kind of stone as this point, and all of this chipping debris. So it's really fun to find the actual artifact. It looks like it broke during manufacture. It looks like it was just about finished and it snapped. And they probably just threw one piece over there and then one piece over here because they were mad. So, but we did find all the pieces, that sort of could reconstruct what was going on. They were making the tool right there, and we have all of the chipping debris. And you can see how we have this on, so this is different sizes. We measure every piece, and we figure out the level of, it tells us how much, how they were working their stone tools. And we also know that that type of spear point was used with a spear thrower, which we call an atlatl, because we have found the Neville points, and these are weights that are on the spear thrower. I don't know if anybody has ever seen these before, but we have found them in context. The point here, the weights here, and the wooden shafts had disintegrated. But we were able to take measurements and figure out how long the spears might have been. And a more likely scenario is that instead of whipping them across a big open plain, which we wouldn't do really in the New England woodlands, people may have been hunting from trees as they do today, and hunting blinds for deer. And this would have been a likely scenario during the Middle Archaic period, with an oak forest and waiting for the deer to come by. We also found woodworking tools at J.T. Berry, and that are for, again, making canoes, chopping trees, making bowls. This is a gouge that we found close to those water towers, actually. And this is the two sides of it, and we have that here tonight as well. And just an example of how one of those may have been hafted and used.
They found one of those in Weymouth.
And did they find one in Weymouth too? Yeah. And just, all of this material comes back to our lab, we wash it all, we catalog it, and then we go on and we make all sorts of fancy graphs to show us how many different kinds of stone tools we have, the different kinds of either projectile points or scrapers or drills, or and we also have, and as I said, we measure all of our chipping debris and the different pieces to find out what level of stone tool making, because either someone could just be doing some extra refinishing work on a tool, or they could actually be making the tool from scratch right there. And we did find a lot of that, because we found a lot of large pieces.